The Euphrates River reflects the golden light of torches illuminating the highest walls in the known world. It is the night of October 12, 539 BC. Within the walls of Babylon, the greatest metropolis on earth celebrates yet another night of seemingly eternal prosperity. In the halls of the royal palace, King Nabonidus and his court participate in a sacred banquet dedicated to the gods. Golden goblets circulate among nobles dressed in embroidered robes. Musicians play lyres and harps. The aroma of roasted lamb mingles with cedar incense. In the streets below, merchants close their stalls in the central market. Bakers remove the last loaves of bread from their clay ovens. Priests walk in procession through the corridors of the Temple of Marduk, chanting prayers in Akkadian. The city exudes confidence. After all, how could a metropolis protected by walls 10 meters thick and 80 meters high be conquered? How could a city that houses 200,000 inhabitants, controls trade routes between 3 continents, and possesses enough grain reserves to withstand a 20-year siege possibly fall? But at that very moment, 15 kilometers north of the city, something extraordinary is happening. The Euphrates River, the vital vein that has flowed through Babylon for millennia, is beginning to disappear. Its waters, which normally run deep and powerful, are receding centimeter by centimeter, and no one inside the walls notices. This is the story of how the greatest city in the ancient world fell without a single pitched battle, of how an urban system considered invincible collapsed in a single night, of how Persian military engineering transformed Babylon's own defense into its greatest vulnerability. To understand how this was possible, we first need to understand what made Babylon so special. This was not just a large city, it was the center of the known universe. For centuries, Babylon functioned as the commercial, religious, and intellectual heart of Mesopotamia. Its streets, organized in a perfect geometric grid, were an unprecedented urban planning innovation. The Ishtar Gate, covered with lapis lazuli tiles imported from Afghanistan, shone with intense blue under the sun. Golden lions, bulls, and dragons decorated its surfaces, creating a visual spectacle that impressed visitors from all nations. The processional way, paved with white and red stones, stretched for almost a kilometer from the gate to the ziggurat of Etemenanki, the tower that inspired the biblical legend of the Tower of Babel. The Euphrates was not merely a source of water. It was the main artery of the entire urban system. Boats laden with copper from Anatolia, ivory from India, timber from Lebanon, and spices from Arabia docked daily at the inner quays. The river crossed the city from north to south, dividing it into 2 halves connected by a monumental bridge. But the Euphrates was also the most important line of defense. The outer walls were built to embrace the river. Massive iron railings, each weighing tons, protected the points where the river entered and exited the city. These railings descended to the riverbed, preventing any enemy vessel or soldier from penetrating beneath them. The system was, in theory, impenetrable. A cloth merchant named Belibni woke up that morning without imagining that he was living through the last day of Babylon as an independent city. He opened his stall in the central market at 6 o'clock, as he had done every day for 30 years. His shelves displayed Egyptian linen, wool dyed with Tyrian purple, and Indian cotton. Customers came and went. They discussed prices. They complained about quality. They asked about new products. The day passed normally. In the temples, priests performed their morning rituals. They washed the statues of the gods. They offered bread, beer, and meat. They burned incense. The world seemed in perfect order. But something was deeply wrong in the kingdom of Babylon. And to understand what was about to happen, we need to look beyond the walls. The Persian Empire, under Cyrus the Great, he had been expanding its territory for almost 20 years. Cyrus had conquered Media, Lydia, and now he was besieging Babylon. But this was no conventional siege. Cyrus had no intention of waiting years until the city exhausted its supplies. He didn't plan to scale the walls or breach the gates. His strategy was far more sophisticated, and it depended on a geographical peculiarity that few Babylonians remembered. About 65 kilometers north of Babylon, Queen Nitocris had ordered the construction decades earlier of a system of artificial lakes and irrigation canals. The original purpose was to control the Euphrates floods during the spring. The canals could divert excess water to controlled marshes, protecting the city from flooding. It was an ingenious system of water management, but it was also a strategic vulnerability, and Cyrus knew it. For months, while maintaining a symbolic siege around Babylon, Cyrus secretly deployed thousands of soldiers to work to the north. They weren't building siege towers or battering rams. They were digging, widening the ancient canals of the Nitocris, removing dams, preparing an alternate route for the river. When everything was ready, Cyrus gave the order. On the afternoon of October 12th, the Persian soldiers opened the floodgates. The Euphrates began to be diverted into the marshes. Inside Babylon, no one noticed immediately. The river was wide and deep. A slight drop in the water level went unnoticed. Boats continued to dock. Fishermen cast their nets. Women washed clothes on the banks. The city functioned normally. In the afternoon, Bel-Ibni closed his tent, counted his silver coins, and returned home. He dined with his family. Perhaps he commented on the political tension. Perhaps he worried about rumors that the Persian army was nearby. But the walls were solid. The king was in the palace. The gods protected the city. There was no real reason for panic. As night fell, the royal banquet began. This was no ordinary celebration. It was an important religious ritual performed annually. The king and nobles drank from golden goblets that had been looted from the temple in Jerusalem decades before. It was a show of power, an assertion of supremacy. Inside the palace, the atmosphere was one of absolute confidence. Outside, on the walls, the guards made their routine rounds. They gazed at the dark horizon. They checked the gates. They inspected the iron railings over the river. Everything seemed to be in order. But at 10 o'clock at night, something began to change. The river level was visibly dropping. The waters that normally reached waist deep now barely covered knees. Some guards noticed, but they didn't understand the meaning. Perhaps it was a temporary drought. Perhaps the gods were withdrawing the water for some sacred reason. There was no protocol for dealing with that situation. And then, in the shadows of the north bank, figures began to move. Persian soldiers, thousands of them, were entering the city by way of the riverbed. They walked silently through the shallow water, passing under the iron gates that had been designed to touch the riverbed, but now hung in the air above their heads. Babylon's most important defense had become an entry point. The Persians divided into groups. Some followed the banks. Others went up to the inner streets. Their orders were clear: take control of the gates and the palace without causing unnecessary destruction. Cyrus did not want to sack Babylon. He wanted to rule it. The first Babylonians to notice the invasion were the guards at the inner gates. But it was too late. The Persians had seized the strategic positions before any alarm could be effectively raised. Small clashes occurred in some places. Loyal guards tried to resist. But the Persian coordination was perfect. They knew the city's layout. They knew where the barracks, the arsenals, and the command centers were located. In a few hours, they controlled the vital points. In the palace, the banquet continued. Perhaps you've heard of complex systems collapsing because no one believed collapse was possible. Babylon was exactly that. Confidence in the walls was so absolute that the idea of invasion seemed absurd. Even when messengers tried to warn the king about strange movements in the streets, their words were dismissed as unfounded panic. How could an army be inside the city? The gates were closed. The walls were intact. It was impossible. But at 3 in the morning, Persian soldiers arrived at the gates of the palace complex. King Nabonidus had not yet grasped the magnitude of what was happening. According to some historical sources, he tried to organize a resistance. According to others, he fled to the north of the city. What we know for sure is that, when the sun rose on October 13th, the Persian flag flew over the ziggurats of Babylon. The population awoke to a completely new reality. Persian soldiers patrolled the streets. The gates were open, yet the river was slowly returning to its normal level. Bel-Ibni opened his tent that morning and saw foreign troops buying bread at the market. Daily life continued, but under a new power. And most remarkably, the city was practically intact. There were no mass fires. There was no destruction of the temples. There was no widespread massacre of the population. This was no accident. It was Cyrus's deliberate strategy. He understood something fundamental about governing empires. Brutal conquests breed eternal resistance. Conquests that respect local structures generate collaboration. Cyrus presented himself not as a conqueror, but as a liberator. He restored religious cults that Nabonidus had suppressed. He allowed Babylonians to occupy administrative positions. He respected local laws. He protected the temples. The famous Cyrus Cylinder, a clay document that has survived to this day, records his proclamation. He had liberated Babylon from a ruthless king and restored traditional order. This political strategy completely transformed the meaning of the fall of Babylon. At first glance, it seems like a simple military conquest, but in reality, it was the birth of a new model of empire. Previous empires ruled through fear and force. The Persian Empire would rule through efficient administration and calculated respect for local cultures. Babylon was not destroyed, it was integrated. And so, paradoxically, the city that fell without a fight became even more important under Persian rule than it had been as an independent capital. In the following years, Babylon prospered as never before. It became the administrative capital of the richest province in the Persian Empire. Its trade routes expanded. Its temples received imperial investment. Its scribes translated Persian texts into Akkadian and vice versa. The city that the Babylonians feared losing transformed into the cultural heart of an empire that stretched from India to Greece. And you, who have followed this historical reconstruction of one of the most decisive moments in antiquity so far, may be wondering, how was such a radical transformation possible without further resistance? The answer lies in the nature of the Babylonian system itself. Babylon was an extremely hierarchical and centralized society. Power emanated from the king and the temples. The common people had little political voice. When the top of the hierarchy changed hands, the base simply continued to function. Merchants like Bel-Ibni had no deep emotional loyalty to King Nabonidus, and they were loyal to their own economic survival. And Cyrus ensured that this survival remained possible. The priests who could have led religious resistance were co-opted with privileges. The administrators who knew the bureaucratic workings of the city were kept in their posts. What we witnessed in the fall of Babylon was therefore not merely an ingenious military victory. It was a demonstration that complex systems can change hands without collapsing, provided their fundamental structures are preserved. The city remained Babylon. The people continued to speak Akkadian. The gods continued to be worshipped. The markets continued to function. What changed was who controlled the system from above. This model influenced all subsequent great empires. Alexander the Great studied Cyrus's campaigns. Rome learned that conquering territories was less important than governing them sustainably. The Ottoman Empire developed the millet system, allowing religious communities to maintain their autonomy. Cyrus's strategy echoed through the centuries. But the fall of Babylon also teaches us something about systemic vulnerabilities. The city had invested centuries building ever higher and thicker walls. It had developed a defense system that seemed absolutely impenetrable. But all this confidence was based on an unquestioned assumption that the river would always be there. running at the same level. When this assumption was challenged, the entire defense system collapsed. The impenetrable walls became irrelevant. The iron gates became mere decoration. The most expensive and sophisticated defense in the world was bypassed with excavation work done far from the eyes of the defenders. Complex societies always have hidden points of failure. They are assumptions so basic that no one thinks to question them until it's too late. For Babylon, it was the river. For other systems, it might be trade routes, energy sources, political alliances, or even deep-seated cultural beliefs. Collapse rarely comes from the point you're looking at. It comes from the point you haven't even considered vulnerable. Bel-Ibni, the cloth merchant, lived 40 more years under Persian rule. His business prospered. He saw his daughters marry, his grandchildren born. For him personally, the fall of Babylon was merely an administrative change. Life went on. But for world history, that October night represented a fundamental transformation in the nature of imperial power. It demonstrated that intelligent conquest surpasses brute force, that engineering can overcome military mass, that preservation is more efficient than destruction, that sustainable empires are built with politics, not just swords. Today, more than 2,500 years later, the ruins of Babylon still exist in Iraq. The walls have crumbled. The Ishtar Gate has been reconstructed in a museum in Berlin. The Euphrates has changed its course several times. But the lesson remains clear. Seemingly invincible systems fall when their invisible foundations are removed. And when they fall, the world that emerges can be completely different from what its defenders imagined. The Great Babylon was not burned. It was not sacked to its foundations. Shemit's population was not massacred. It was integrated, transformed, and paradoxically, preserved. The greatest city of the ancient world fell without an epic battle. And perhaps that is precisely why its fall changed everything. Because it proved that conquest does not have to mean destruction, that a shift in power can happen without apocalypse, that the end of one system can be the beginning of another, even broader one. This was Babylon, the city that fell to survive, the empire that died to be reborn as the heart of a larger world. If you could spend only 24 hours in any ancient city that we haven't yet featured on this channel, which one would you choose and why? I'll select the best suggestions from the comments to be the subject of our next major documentary. And if this dive into the epic history of Babylon touched you in any way, consider subscribing to the channel. Every week, we reconstruct pivotal moments from the past with this same rigor and narrative passion. Don't miss the next story.